In today's times, most people know that you can't really trust your children around anyone that you don't know very well. TV and the internet and cable news networks like the ID channel that covers the crimes of our times, gives us a daily reminder to keep an eye on your kids, and to keep strangers at arm's length at all times. In the late 1920s, it was a much different time indeed. The Budd family from New York would find this out in the worst possible way. The Albert Fish case isn't just one of the worst crimes of the 1920s. It's one of the most sickening crimes in American history. It all began innocently enough. In late May of 1928, Fish was reading a newspaper classifieds section, and he stumbled upon an ad that caught his attention. Edward Budd posted a work wanted ad to earn some money to help his family, so he posted an ad in the New York Mirror searching for work. Fish saw it, but had a much more twisted idea in mind. He wanted to kidnap the boy and torture him, and eventually eat him. He made his way to the address in the ad, and when he saw the boy, he knew that he was much too large and strong to handle. Still, he mingled with the family and their second youngest daughter, Grace Budd, who was only 10 years old, and who took an instant liking to the elderly man. Fish had introduced himself as Frank Howard, and had told the family that he would send for the boy in a few days, and that he had a lot of work that he could get done. When that day came and passed, Fish contacted the family and apologized for the delay, and said that he would be in touch soon. When he went back to visit, young Grace, who was barely 10 years old, went over and sat on Fish's lap and began to talk to him. It was then that he changed his mind and decided to kill the little girl instead. He quickly made up a fabricated story about there being a birthday party for a relative, and he asked the family if she could go. Today, the idea of sending our 10-year-old daughter out with someone we had just met, especially in New York or any large city, is completely insane, but it was a much more trusting time in those days. The parents agreed that she could go. It would prove to be the worst decision the family would ever make. Grace left with Fish that day but never returned. The police soon charged an elderly building superintendent by the name of Charles Edward Pope, solely on the accusations of his wife. There was no proof of any wrongdoing on his part, and after spending 108 days in jail, his charges were dropped, and he was released from jail. The police were stumped until letters started to arrive at the Budd household. Mrs. Budd could not read or write, so she took the letters to the police. The contents of the letter are absolutely sickening, and were full of spelling and grammar errors. They basically were a way to psychologically torture the Budd family. It later talked about the murder of their daughter, and told them how he had cooked and eaten her. There is so much wrong here. First, can you imagine having this happen to your child? On top of that, can you imagine the guilt that not only the parents felt, but the brother as well, even though he was well-meaning by posting the ad that brought in this sick and sadistic monster? It's truly heartbreaking to think about. Anywho, his capture came by the letter that was delivered in an envelope that had a small hexagonal emblem with the letters NYPCBA, which stood for the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. One of the men who worked at the company told the police he had taken some of the stationery home, but left it at his rooming house at 200 East 52nd Street when he moved out. The landlady of the rooming house said that Fish checked out of that room a few days earlier. She said that Fish's son sent him money, and he asked her to hold his next check for him. William F. King was the chief investigator for the case. He waited outside the room until Fish returned. Fish agreed to go to headquarters for questioning, then brandished a razor blade. King disarmed Fish and took him to police headquarters. Not only did he not deny the murder, he seemed to brag about it. He even admitted that Grace Budd's brother was the initial target, and he told the stunned police about cooking and eating the little girl. This was long before the days of horror movies and true crime channels. This kind of thing was unheard of in the 1920s, especially from such an elderly man. The officers had to be in shock when they heard the details of the murder. They soon found out that Grace wasn't his first child murder. 9-year-old Frances McDonald went missing on the evening of July the 14th of 1924. He was soon reported missing, and a search was soon begun to look for the little boy who had failed to return home after playing ball with his friends. They found him nearby, hanging from a tree, and he too was a horrific, shocking scene. He had cuts and bruises all over, and was found hanging by his own suspenders. His left leg was nearly stripped of all flesh. He had also been sexually abused. At first, Fish denied this murder, but soon admitted that he would have castrated him if he hadn't nearly been caught, and had to run away. McDonald's friends told the police that he was taken by an elderly man with a gray mustache. A neighbor also told the police he observed the boy with a similar-looking man walking along a grassy path into the nearby woods. Frances' mother, Anna McDonald, said she saw the same man earlier that day. She told the reporters, "He came shuffling down the street mumbling to himself, and making queer motions with his hands. I saw his thick gray hair, and his drooping gray mustache. Everything about him seemed faded and gray." The following February, he attacked and killed another young, defenseless child, 3-year-old Billy Beaton. Young Billy was in the hallway of his apartment building playing with another young friend and his brother when Fish took him. Although his body was never found, Fish later admitted to the murder in a letter to his attorney. When they asked one of the other children what happened to Billy, they simply said, "The boogeyman took him." Albert Fish was just that. He had many nicknames as the trial went on. He was dubbed the Boogeyman, the Brooklyn Vampire, and the Werewolf of Wisteria, among other things. The New York Daily Mirror wrote that the disclosure solidified Fish's reputation as the most vicious child slayer in criminal history. Along with the 3 murders he was known to have committed, he was also suspected in the deaths of 5-year-old Emma Richardson, 12-year-old Yetta Abramovitz, 6-year-old Robin Jane Liu, 16-year-old Mary Ellen O'Connor, and 17-year-old Benjamin Collings. He was even suspected in having a male lover and killing him and severing his manhood, and eating that as well. As if all of this wasn't weird enough, it gets even stranger. Albert Fish's father died when he was a young boy, and his mother had to send him to an orphanage because she could not afford to take care of her son. It was there where he started to act out, and was reportedly beaten on a regular basis. Instead of hurting him, he seemed to not only like it, but he enjoyed it. He would get off on the pain. The more it hurt, the more he liked it. Even as an adult and marrying and having children of his own, he would get down on all fours, and have his own wife and kids shove needles up his butt and spank him hard with a paddle until he would bleed. The man had more than a few screws loose. Regardless, Fish arrived at prison in March of 1935, and was executed on January 16, 1936 in the electric chair at Sing Sing. His reign of terror over the children of New York was finally over. Thanks for watching this story. Wow, was this guy nuts or what? If you liked the story, a thumbs up and a subscribe would sure be appreciated. Tell your friends and co-workers about us. Pick up some of our merch in the links below. Till next time.